Have you ever wondered what happened to Adam and Eve after they were cast out of Eden? The Bible we know leaves only a shadow, a heavy silence, between the fall and the birth of life in a corrupted world. But what if I told you there is an ancient manuscript, ignored and forgotten by many, that tells exactly that story? A text that reveals sorrow, tears, spiritual battles, and the deepest pain Adam and Eve endured, not in paradise, but here, and on earth. This is the Book of Adam and Eve, a work that carries immense weight, the weight of regret, of a desperate search for forgiveness, and the fragile hope of redemption. Now, the question that echoes through time: why was this story hidden from the eyes of the world? Why doesn't a story so powerful, so deeply human, appear in the Bible we know today? Could it be that some truths are so deep, so unsettling, they had to be buried? Before we dive into these revelations, I invite you, if you're searching for more than what tradition reveals, if you want to go beyond the surface, subscribe to this channel and like this video. Join a community that seeks the truth, the one hidden between the lines of history. So now, let's begin and uncover what truly happened to the first ones who carried the weight of the fall. And there, on humanity's first night away from God, the heavens fell silent. They were torn from the living presence of the Almighty, cast into a world unknown, hostile, and still. And it was there, outside the gates of paradise, that mankind's true sorrow began. The Book of Adam and Eve paints this new reality with haunting detail. The earth was not as we know it today. It was dark, cold, filled with invisible terrors. Fear was constant, hunger was real, suffering inevitable. Imagine Adam, formed to be immortal, feeling physical pain for the very first time. Imagine Eve, created to dwell in divine glory, now crushed by the weight of separation. The manuscript says that as they took their first steps outside Eden, they broke down in tears, a grief so deep, the earth itself seemed to tremble beneath their sorrow. Adam fell to the ground and cried out, "Now think with me. How many times, even today, is our greatest pain not physical, but the feeling of spiritual distance? Though they suffered, they longed to return. They fasted, they prayed without ceasing, they cried out for the mercy they had lost. They dug holes in the earth, buried their faces in the dust, and mourned. They went days without food or water, prostrate, waiting for a word from God. And in response to that despair, God sent signs. Angels came to comfort them. Dreams brought divine messages. Whispers of redemption began to stir. In other words, even in the greatest spiritual tragedy of human history, hope was never fully extinguished. The book shows that though divine justice was unrelenting, mercy never vanished. And perhaps this is one of the most powerful messages of this forgotten text. Now pause and reflect. Stay with me, the revelation has only just begun. Eden, perfect and untouched, was now behind them. Adam and Eve had stepped into a harsher reality, biting cold, hunger, thirst, discomfort. For the first time, creation, which once moved in harmony, began to resist the touch of mankind. The earth, which once gave fruit without effort, now demanded sweat. Labor ceased to be a joy and became a burden. The Book of Adam and Eve describes this transition in painful detail. Adam, unaccustomed to toil, tore his hands on hardened soil. Eve, once protected by the garden's abundance, now felt the weight of a weary body, bound by weakness. Before their eyes, the earth appeared shattered and cruel. Cracked ground, thorns rising from dust, cold winds cutting their skin, as if even nature mourned their fall, and more than effort. They now felt pain, pain in the body, pain in the soul, pain in the separation, and here, a new truth took root. Eternity, once natural, now felt impossibly distant, and the fear of death became a constant companion. Now think with me. Even today, death remains humanity's greatest mystery. No matter how far science goes, no matter how many centuries pass, that feeling isn't just cultural. Maybe it's engraved in the depths of our soul, a lingering memory of a lost Eden, where death was only a distant shadow. The Book of Adam and Eve echoes this truth. Their children and grandchildren inherited more than life. They inherited the weight of pain, sickness, and the inescapable end. That invisible inheritance passed through the ages. Even now, when we look at hospitals, cemeteries, battlefields, we see the scars of that first fall, and the most painful part, they mourned each death, as those who knew this was never meant to be the end. Now pause and reflect. In the next chapter, we'll witness how, even in the fall, God did not abandon mankind, and how the first whispers of redemption began to stir in the heart of exile, because where pain abounded, hope began to whisper. Even outside of Eden, Adam and Eve were not alone. The adversary, the one who had already deceived them once, did not give up. The Book of Adam and Eve describes how, in exile, Satan tried again and again to attack them, not just with visible temptations, but with subtle doubts and emotional traps. He would take on forms, manipulate the surroundings, appear as light, disguise himself as comfort, all to entangle Adam and Eve in new snares. Now think with me. If in paradise the enemy acted with cunning, how much more deceptive would he be in the wilderness of sorrow? And the enemy struck exactly there, planting the thought that God had abandoned them, feeding despair, fueling guilt. Have you ever stopped to reflect on this? Satan didn't just want to harm Adam and Eve physically. He wanted to crush hope inside them, because without hope, there is no redemption. Without faith, there is no way back. And here lies the turning point. But with promises thus of future restoration, promises that evil would be defeated, that the serpent would be crushed, that mankind would one day walk again with the Creator. This resistance, this choice to keep seeking, was what kept the spark of redemption alive on earth. Now ask yourself, that God has forgotten? And every prayer, even the weakest, most tearful one, is an invisible thread that ties us back to the throne of grace. Amid the cold, the hunger, the pain, and the longing for Eden, God did not remain silent. The Book of Adam and Eve reveals that even in the fall, the Most High never abandoned his children. On the contrary, he gave them signs. He sowed seeds of hope. He planted within their hearts the echo of a greater promise. In those first days outside the garden, Adam was overwhelmed. He cried out to God, wept for forgiveness, poured out his sorrow, and the answer came, not as a return to the paradise they had lost, but as a promise, a prophecy that one day someone would come to crush the serpent's head, to restore what had been broken. This prophecy echoes not only in the Book of Adam and Eve, but also in Genesis 3:15, when God declares that the seed of the woman would strike the serpent's head. Now think with me, Adam and Eve, still covered in grief, receiving a promise they would never see fulfilled, a promise meant for future generations, for children not yet born, and still they believed, here, something sacred is born. In the Book of Adam and Eve, there are touching moments where Adam pleads with God to grant him even a glimpse of the lost garden. And what's most moving? How often today, in our own personal exiles, through losses, failures, and life's deserts, does God also plant quiet seeds of hope? That keeps hope alive, even under the shadows of sorrow. And here in the book of Adam and Eve, we witness the first sparks of that faith being lit. The hope that endures the darkness, the promise that resists the passing of time, the quiet certainty that one day the serpent would be crushed and paradise restored. In the next chapter, we'll descend into a moment even more profound and tested, the fragile hope born in the midst of the fall, their pain. May be closer to ours than we ever imagined. Stay with us. The revelation continues. The pain of exile was not the only weight Adam and Eve had to bear. Suffering would reach its peak when death crossed the threshold of their home. The book of Adam and Eve describes one of the most heartbreaking moments in all of human history, the first death. And it was not natural. It was murder. Cain, their firstborn, consumed by envy, rage, and the corruption already rooted in human nature, killed his own brother, Abel. For the first time, human blood stained the earth, and that blood cried out. According to Genesis, God said to Cain, "Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground." Genesis 4:10. Now imagine what that meant for Adam and Eve. They didn't just lose a son, they lost two. One, dead, the other, exiled. Their hope for restoration seemed to crumble before them. The pain of being cast from Eden was already great, but to watch death invade their family, to witness hatred consume their children, was a wound even deeper. And here comes another reflection. How many families today are destroyed by violence? How many hearts broken by pride, envy, greed? This tragedy didn't start today. Its roots reach back to the dawn of humanity. The book of Adam and Eve captures this pain in striking detail. When Eve finds Abel's lifeless body, she collapses in despair. She doesn't understand. Death was still a mystery. She screams, cries to the heavens, tears her garments. It is an ancient grief, one that echoes today in every mother who buries her child. And Adam, crushed by guilt and helplessness, realizes the fall was not a single moment in the past. It was unfolding, generation after generation, like a silent poison. Cain was cursed, and his descendant Lamech would bring even more violence into the world, fueling a cycle that only deepened. The corruption that began with one act of disobedience in Eden now revealed itself in murder, injustice, and self-destruction, and that spiral of sorrow was just beginning. In other ancient writings, it said, Adam and Eve mourned Abel's death for years. They planted trees in his memory. They looked to the heavens, searching for an answer that would not come for a very long time. Now think with me, if the very first generation fell so deeply, what would happen to those who came after? And more than that, could it be that even today, through wars, betrayal, division, we are still reaping the fruit of that first wound? If there is one pain humanity has never overcome, it is loss. And it all began there, on the hard ground of a new world, with blood and tears, mingled. But even in the midst of devastation, a promise still echoed. The hope that from the line of Adam would come one who would crush the serpent's head. Someone who would bring life where death had reigned. And that is what we'll explore in the next and final chapter. The final legacy of Adam and Eve, the promise of redemption, and how the fall prepared the stage for the greatest revelation in human history. Stay with us. There is still light at the end of the journey. After everything, after Eden was lost, after the pain, the sickness, the death, there was still something Adam and Eve carried, something that neither time, nor guilt, nor suffering could erase. Hope. Even far from the full presence of God, they were not forgotten. and deep within their souls, they held on to a promise. The Book of Adam and Eve suggests that even in exile, they continued to seek the face of the Creator. They prayed, they fasted, they wept, not only for what had been lost, but for what could still be restored. The fall did not fully extinguish the divine spark. It buried it in dust, pain, and distance, but it did not destroy it, and that spark was passed on. It was taught to their surviving children, like Seth, the one who, according to the writings, preserved the lineage of the righteous. Seth taught Enosh. Enosh taught his sons, and so from generation to generation, hope passed through the shadows of history. Now think with me. If the legacy of Adam and Eve had been only sin, humanity would have perished. But they left another legacy, the longing for redemption. That quiet hope was what kept the faith of the patriarchs alive. It's what moved Abraham to believe in the promise, what inspired Moses to lead a people, what was prophesied by Isaiah as he spoke of a suffering servant who would bring light to those dwelling in darkness. And finally, it was fulfilled in its fullness with the coming of the one called the second Adam, Jesus Christ. In 1 Corinthians 15:22, the Apostle Paul declares, "For as in Adam all die, so in Christ shall all be made alive." Do you see the cycle? Adam brought death, Christ brought life. Adam fell by the tree of knowledge. Christ triumphed on the tree of the cross. Adam lost Eden. Christ reopened the way to paradise. What the book of Adam and Eve shows us, in its hidden lines, its tears, its prayers, is that God's plan was never abandoned. The fall did not catch the Creator by surprise. Pain did not overcome love. And the story that began in tragedy was always destined to end in glory. Now, one final reflection. Today, we still live in a world marked by the fall. We feel the weight of sin, the sting of loss, the ache of imperfection. But we also feel something else, the call of hope, the voice that whispers deep within, "You were not made to die, you were made to live." And that's why, deep down, no heart is ever fully at peace here, because we were made for something greater. Adam and Eve left us more than the inheritance of pain. They left us the memory of Eden, the longing for communion, the desire for redemption, and that desire points toward what is yet to come. A new heaven, a new earth, where there will be no more death, no more mourning, no more tears, no more pain, where the tree of life will bloom once more, and where the story of the fall will finally be closed. Not as a defeat, but as the greatest victory of grace.